China's telecom giant Huawei has dismissed a decision by the UK to ban the company's 5G network equipment, describing the move as disappointing and politicized. A Huawei official said that London has reacted to pressure from Washington rather than security concerns. Reaction came after the British Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport said telecoms providers must not buy any 5G equipment from Huawei from the end of this year. The ban comes nearly 2 weeks after London described Huawei as a potentially hostile state vendor. The Chinese firm is the biggest global maker of telecom switching equipment. Beijing has warned to retaliate, threatening to open a new front in China-UK rift. And now joining us for this news review is James Tweedy, journalist and commentator from Plymouth, and Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in Bristol with you, Tony. Good to see you again. And your thoughts on this? I mean, is this just allegations or is it legit?
Well, it's allegations. There's no evidence presented of how Huawei is supposed to use these units to spy on everybody. I think also one of the things that isn't really discussed here is that the US equipment that we all use, Microsoft, that sort of thing, Windows. I mean, Bill Gates only really became powerful through Microsoft after doing secret deals with the CIA and IBM back in the 1970s to allow backdoors into everybody's computers through Windows. So the Americans and I suppose their friends within the Yakuza, or what is now the Five Eyes countries, have been for many, many years been snooping into people's computers, getting people's personal information. And I mean, I as a journalist really object to that. I think everybody should object to it, but there is no way of stopping either politicians, lawyers or journalists having the information stolen from their computers and then either given or sold for political purposes. And this is something that they're trying to make out is something that only Huawei could possibly do, this sort of thing. Now, these big tech companies like Microsoft in the US have been compromising the democracy and national security, if you want, in the West for many, many years, for decades. And now they're suddenly saying, oh, it's just Huawei. Well, they've been doing it for many, many years and really denuding democracy by all this mass surveillance. And much of it, the way the legislation, the law in the West has gone, is it's followed the criminal behavior of the intelligence services and big tech. So as they've been discovered to be doing things they shouldn't be doing, in other words, committing crimes, then so the law has been changed in order to try and make it so that it's not a crime anymore. So that's the way it's been. They've been really, you know, the politicians and the ordinary folk out here, we have just been on the back foot the whole way through this tech revolution. And to be honest, it's like the monopolistic sort of situation that we had with John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil at the beginning of the 20th century. The massive monopoly that had to be broken up. There's now this enormous monopoly with companies like Microsoft and Google doing very, very close deals with each other, basically working together as an oligopoly to mine all of our information and all of our data for the Pentagon and people like this for total information awareness is what they want. They want to know everything about everyone. And we know what the Nazis did with that information when they had lots of, they used these IBM machines during World War II, is they used it to just arrest whole areas of society. In that case, it was Jews. And they could possibly do the same with all this massive amount of data that they've been mining, but with spades in the future. That's why we need some sort of guarantee, not that just Huawei, but the Americans at IBM and the US equivalents of this hardware are not being used to mine our data as citizens, journalists, lawyers, and MPs, politicians, having data mined on them too.
Thank you, Tony. And James, welcome to the program. James, your initial thoughts on this, please.
Well, firstly, I think the reasons given by the government they don't really add up, because they're saying that that it's partly because the US has banned its tech producers from selling components to Huawei, so Huawei equipment won't be up to scratch, something like that. So, but that doesn't really work out because they could get it from other places, and why then ban it? Why don't just let the companies that are installing this stuff decide whether the Huawei equipment is good enough? People in the industry here in Britain are saying it's a very bad idea. It's going to slow down the implementation of 5G technology, mobile phone technology. It's hard to see. It's hard to see if it benefits anyone here in Britain, because Huawei's competitors are, Ericsson is from Sweden and Nokia is Finnish, and Samsung is from South Korea, the Republic of Korea, and others are from Japan. So we don't have a big, mobile phone producer in this country competing with them. What else can I say? I would say that, you might ask what are the reasons for this. I mean, I think generally speaking, one part of it is that China is able to outproduce and outcompete increasingly countries in the West, but also that China is investing in the developing world, especially Africa, and lending money to governments in those countries to for development projects, and that breaks the hegemony of the West countries, who like to maintain a neo-colonial relationship with Africa and Latin America and Asia, and so and breaks the kind of monopoly of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So these are the root causes, I think, of the hostility between the USA especially and European, the EU countries and China.
And Tony, according to your narrative, so if you don't give it to Huawei, who do you give the contract to? And I mean, what you were saying basically, there is no safe provider, is there?
Well, look, the share prices of the US tech companies that are manufacturing similar products have leapt today, I don't doubt, because this is really nothing to do with national security. I think it's much more to do with bolstering US firm and US trade. The US can't compete with Huawei, and they can't compete on a level playing field. In fact, the United States has never been very good at level playing fields when it comes to competition. It would rather shoot its opposition than actually compete fairly. That's one way I think we've seen in Britain over the last 30, 40, 50 years, is we've seen our sort of fair-minded competition system that we had of capitalism in the 1960s and 70s completely booted out by this very aggressive, actually fascist style attempt to destroy one's competition rather than actually compete with them. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here with Huawei. And the Brits have just caved in. It's pathetic, really, to see the way the government, they took all the advice from the security services, said actually there's no difference between this equipment, it's not a security risk. And this is GCHQ in Cheltenham saying this, and the rest is ignored. But the one good spin-off from this is it may well slow down the implementation of 5G. Now, 5G is not really needed. I use mobile data quite a lot, and you can get very fast speeds, for video and audio, etc., with 4G. 5G is a real big step up from it. It's much more intrusive. It comes right into people's homes at a much higher frequency. Remember, these are microwaves. You know what microwave ovens do to people. And there are the European Parliament, literally just 3 weeks ago, came up with a fascinating report into the regulation of 5G in Europe. And what it said was basically that the ICNIRP is the name of the regulators for 5G, and they're not just in Europe, in other parts of the world. They are extremely basically run and taken over by the industry itself. So you can't have the 5G telecoms industry regulating itself. You need to have some tough, strong regulation which represents the public. They've got to live next door to these masts, schools and hospitals where these masts are on top of them. So we need to have some proper regulation of 5G before it's rolled out. So that may be a positive spin-off of all this, is it slows down the implementation of 5G. But really, this is a trade war, which may even end up in a shooting war, because this is what Trump seems to be doing now, ramping up everything with the Chinese. And the Chinese, of course, are understandably, in some ways, retaliating by, for example, bringing in the national security law in Hong Kong. These things have massive consequences. And remember, Donald Trump wrote his book about the art of the deal. Maybe he's pushing this deal with China too far. And, you know, millions of people are suffering, millions of people now living in fear as a result, as we move closer towards what could be a shooting war from this trade war.
Okay, James, we don't have much time. We have about a minute left. Go ahead, your final thoughts, bud.
Well, what can I say? You know, it's strange to talk about not allowing the a company that's state-owned in another country to trade in your country for fears of for security fears. I mean, I'd agree a little bit with my colleague there that 5G can. There are some uses of 5G, including in relation to self-driving cars, that could potentially be dangerous. But it doesn't really matter which country that equipment's coming from. I wouldn't get in a self-driving car. I wouldn't, not even as a passenger. I would not have one of those things. They've already killed people. In this country we have state-owned firms, enterprises from other countries running parts of our rail network, like SNCF France. Okay, this is real. This already happens. It's quite normal. There are state-owned enterprises in capitalist economies. In fact, Huawei says it's worker-owned, not state-owned. Or it's a worker-state in China, okay, but it's a worker-owned enterprise and not a nationalized state-owned enterprise. So, I think the government needs to get some common sense about this, and it might have to reverse that decision sooner or later.
Gents, thank you both for joining us. James Tweedy from Plymouth and Mr. Tony Gosling there joining us from Bristol. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.